Hello everyone, welcome to the fourth edition of our GESS Talks webinar series. It's great to see so many of you tuning in. A few bits about the webinar before we get underway. For all attendees, you can find a control panel on the side. There's a Q&A tab, a polls tab and a handouts tab where you can find further information from our panelists. During the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A, ask us questions. The panelists would love to hear your thoughts. We'll do our best to get through them. If we don't manage to get through them all, the system saves them down and we'll get back to you after the event. If you want to enjoy the webinar all over again, you can do so by uploading it, as we'll be uploading it to our YouTube channel and sending it out to you by email. We'll be on social media as well. So if you want to chat to us there, follow us on Twitter @GESSEducation and use the hashtags #GuestDubai and #GuestTalks. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. Our chair and moderator, Yannicka Arnes, Director of the Universal American School in Dubai, Henning Fries, Chief Operating Officer of the Dwight Schools, Mohammed Saad, Director of the Agile International Schools in Abu Dhabi, and Kevin Korbrook, Deputy Director of Al Bayan Bilingual School in Kuwait. Thank you, and over to you, Yannicka.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us at the end of a business day. For many of you, depending on where you are in the world, this might actually be the start of a business day for some of you. So we're happy to be able to get together and talk about lessons learned and ways forward in what is a quite unique educational landscape under these times of pandemic. My name is Yannicka Arnes. I am, as I was introduced, the Director of Universal American School in Dubai. I joined the school in August, and from a director's perspective, it's quite interesting to join a school right in the middle of this quite unique situation. So I'll be sharing a little bit of my own experience, but mainly moderating a conversation between the panelists. And I would like the panelists maybe to say a little bit more about their own context before we get into the discussion, because we do represent different perspectives. We come from different countries, and we're grappling with a slightly different scenario. So maybe I can pass it over to Mohammed Saad. Could you just say where you are and what the school setting is for you at the moment?
Thank you, Yannicka. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a privilege and an honor to be with you on this webinar. As Yannicka said, my name is Mohammed Saad. I'm based in Abu Dhabi. I'm the executive principal / director of Agile International School in the city of Mohammed bin Zayed in Abu Dhabi. We are part of the Bin Umair Education Group. We've got a sister school in Al Falah, which follows the American curriculum. Since March, like every other school in the UAE, we had to immediately change to distance learning. And we spent almost all the summer working on plans to reopen the school, which has taken every minute of our free time. Now we're back and we're on campus, and it has been exciting times. So I look forward to this event.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'll pass the word over to Henning Fries.
Yeah.
Henning, how are you?
Thank you, Yannicka, and thank you for having me on this panel. Henning Fries, yes, I am based in Dubai, speaking to you currently from Dubai. I work for the Dwight School of Group of Schools. We do have a school in Dubai since about 2 years, which we opened in 2018. We do have schools in London, in New York, which is our main base, as well as in Shanghai and in Seoul, Korea. And like so many schools around here in the region, we've gone through various experiences of closing, half opening, reopening schools in different parts of the world. And it's been quite a journey, like for so many others that are on the call, and I'm happy to share some of that perspective and learnings as we go into this panel. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Henning. And Kevin Korbrook, you're not in Dubai. Where are you?
No, I'm based in Kuwait City. So I am, and thank you for the opportunity. So my name's Kevin Korbrook. I'm the Deputy Director of Al Bayan Bilingual School in Kuwait. We are a large American curriculum school of 2,600 kids and close to 300 staff. Similar to Mohammed, we quite suddenly had to move to online learning in late February. And we have been doing so since then. So our staff have returned in August, but our students are still learning online for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Kevin. So obviously, I think everybody who will be listening in today will have some connection to a school that has either started up or is waiting to start up with on-campus learning. And I think all of us, we have lived through the challenge of having to suddenly move from traditional on-campus learning that we know very well, we know how to deal with, and then suddenly, more or less overnight, waking up to a message saying that you have to move all your students to distance learning. Which is a huge challenge, of course. So the months leading up to the end of the last academic year represented various challenges for schools around the world. Now, of course, we have started up, some of us, and we have learned from the experience of delivering distance learning. But the landscape for those who have opened up on-campus learning is still quite different from the traditional on-campus learning. At least in most schools, there is the option, parents are presented with the option to choose whether they want to send their children to campus or whether they want to continue with distance learning. So the whole educational perspective within the classroom shifts again, and we have to adapt to a new way of teaching and learning. And Mohammed, maybe from your perspective in the school, since you have started up and you have a group of your students still doing distance learning fully, but a group on campus, how have you found that your experiences from before the summer break has helped you prepare for the start? And particularly from a student perspective, what have you done to set yourself up and your students up for success in this landscape?
Thank you, Yannicka. Planning the restart of the reopen of the school has been a challenge in itself. As you are aware, and my fellow panelists are aware, since March, we every single school in the region and mainly in the UAE went to distance learning. And that in itself, it was a new thing. It was something that no teacher has been prepared for, no student has been prepared for, and certainly no parent has been prepared for. Now, going forward to reopening this academic year, there was anticipation by at the point where we needed to know what direction the authorities are going to take in order for us to reopen. And the decision and the choices, as you mentioned, came about in late in July, early August. It was a challenge in itself. It was a very strange feeling. It was a nice thing to know that we're welcoming students back. But at the same time, there was the anxiety and the worry that what's going to happen. At the same time, we had to move towards a whole new territory of face-to-face students and online students at the same time. How to manage that? How to make the combination work? Not to mention going through the 100+ points on the checklist that we needed to go through in order to ensure that we have a safe and safe opening of the school. So the whole perspective was different, and it was a whole new experience. I have to say that welcoming the students back was a very, very good thing on campus.
I agree. I would absolutely agree with you. I think in this experience, we have seen how the mental well-being can be challenged, and I think that's one of the things that we can deal with in a completely different manner when we can be together with the students on campus. And having the social interaction is such an important part of being educated. Henning, maybe you could share a little bit more, because obviously, Kevin, you're preparing for this. So I'll be interested in hearing what you are picking up from others in terms of how you can prepare. But Henning, from your global perspective, what are some of the things that you've had to implement to ease this transition back to campus learning? Yeah.
Good. First of all, I have to say we are in a slightly fortunate position because we had a number of schools who have gone through this process of closing and reopening before we even say we opened our school here in Dubai just 3 weeks ago. We started with our school in Shanghai, which was naturally, as you can imagine, one of the first that would have been affected, and that happened back in February, and shortly thereafter in Seoul. So we were able to gather very quickly best practices and try out different things that helped us then in the other campuses to prepare. Because those schools also, after about 3 months, 3.5 months, they started to reopen again, right? So they reopened already in the previous academic year, and which was quite a feat. In general, what we found is that where we are in an environment where we have a regulator being quite prescriptive in terms of safety protocols, in terms of what is required, we find this actually much better to deal with than being in environments where it's very much left up to you to interpret some of those more ambiguous directions that you would get from regulators and leave it really up to you to make your own judgments, right? So, and again, I think, here, particularly in UAE, we are very fortunate to be in such an environment, and there's a great partnership between regulator and us as schools to help us and work together and guide, because it requires all stakeholders to really work together. Yeah. So from that perspective, I hope that this is also the case, as Kevin is anticipating to open in Kuwait in the future. Again, Dwight, we were in a slightly fortunate position because we've had an online school since 2013. So for our students, and some of our students in our global campuses have actually been participating in this online school, partially through a blended learning program. They've taken some courses. So for a lot of our students, it was not foreign for them to switch to an online delivery of education. And again, the experience that was already within the group of teachers that have also taught online as part of Dwight Global Online were able to share very quickly across all our campuses best practices and get everybody supported in the best possible way. And I think, with that comes also certain aspects of, connectivity, having one-to-one devices. Particularly in Dubai, we are largely a paperless school. So all of our students have already been used to working with assignments on the devices as opposed to with paper. And so there's a high level of digital proficiency amongst the faculty as well as a result. So none of this quick switching that was required in order for delivering distant learning, I don't want to say it was easy. It was a lot of hard work in changing behavior and managing structures and operationally managing classrooms. But all the tools were already in place for us and able to do that. And anybody who is now looking at what it will take to come back, and we still don't know today, are we going to go back to in some stage full distance learning? We hear that in most schools right now, there's a proportion of students in the classroom, there's a proportion of students outside. So this is there to stay for us, and it's all enabled through technology and the ability and knowledge of our teachers, our faculty, and the educators to use that technology to the best of their abilities.
Absolutely. I think you bring up a really good point, Henning. And sometimes if you're in a school where the IT logistics work well, where teachers are well prepared, as you say, you have a global campus, so obviously there's a lot of expertise in the Dwight Group. And we are fortunate when we come from such backgrounds, and sometimes we can forget that in the global perspective, there are lots of educators now that are struggling with basic things such as connectivity and student devices. I don't know, Kevin, in your school in particular, and in your region, how are you preparing logistically? How are you setting up for the transition back? Are you in a similar situation as you have heard from our panelists?
Yeah, so I think Kuwait shows lots of similarities from a regulatory environment to what Henning has described. I would certainly agree with him that operating in that type of environment has its positives and gives a lot more guidance in terms of how to move forward as a school and as a community. We're in a fortunate position, as you mentioned earlier, that we can learn from some of the lessons of schools and districts and countries that have gone before us. A big part for us with that in mind is adapting it to our local context. So for us, a key part moving forward over the next month or two will be involving all our key stakeholders in that planning process for reopening. So involving our students, involving our parents, involving the various authorities as well, and being proactive there to get their points of view, to get their input, so that our plan is as comprehensive as possible, and that it accounts for all those different stakeholders and their different perspectives as we look to go back. So that will be something really important to us as we co-create something moving forward over the coming months.
Yeah. I'm seeing from our listeners that they're raising questions. They're relatively practical questions, and I can absolutely understand that these are top of mind questions. So I'll jump in with a couple of the questions at this point, because conscious of the fact that we have listeners from around the world, and many may be being in the similar situation as you, Kevin, preparing for opening. There are questions about technology and what kind of budgetary allocations have you had to make, or what kind of platforms have you decided to use now that we reopen in a blended learning environment? I know, and also we know from experience that teaching young children online is different from teaching older children online. And Mohammed, considering that you have opened your campus for the younger students, still having your older students doing distance learning, is there anything that you did over the summer that shifted your structures in the school to accommodate this kind of learning environment that we are in now?
Well, absolutely. The end of the previous academic year has given us a lot of lessons to learn from. Number one is that we need to be tech ready. And tech ready is not only the device, it's everything that comes with it. It's the software, the hardware, the human being, and the training and the document behind it. So as Henning said, that the idea of the paperless, paperless means that everything has to go digital, in a sense that the documentation need to be transferred from a hard copy into a digital format, and everything else comes with it. Yes, we had to make our classrooms ready. Of course, we, as mentioned, that we had to go through the security protocols of making sure that the school is safe for kids to return, set our classes as per the regulatory prescriptions. There was a huge investment made in upgrading the equipment that are going to be used in the classroom. For example, in our primary school at the moment, we're using a desktop, and we're using a standalone webcam, which is high resolution and digital. And at the same time, the teachers are logged into an iPad that they can carry around if they want to move a little bit in the classroom and go back, so that they can cater for both the face-to-face students and the online students. This in itself is, you're talking about 3 or 4 pieces of equipment, not to mention the equipment already in the classroom, the overhead projector and the smart board. So altogether, this will take up a chunk of the school budget in terms of planning financially. And we all know the difficulties that schools have gone through because of the pandemic financially. Yeah, there was a lot of planning, as I said, Yannicka, in terms of making the school ready to welcome back kids. And for me, my main challenge was I want the kids back. I want to do everything possible to bring them back to school. Well, from the physical setup of the classroom, social distancing, making sure that the distances are measured. You can imagine that going into the classroom with the measuring tape in my hand, measuring the spaces between the students, and on the students' desks, making sure that there are sneeze guards between the students, so that's an extra measure, and then setting up the technology. And then you can imagine we tested it ourselves, the administration. We posed as students. We went inside the classroom, and we saw how it feels like, the echo, the sound. Can we see clearly the board if the teacher is writing something, how it's going to work on the iPad. Because obviously the teacher would have to log into the account on the platform on 2 different devices. Will it work? Will it doesn't work? Will the sound get mixed together? Will you have that sound that sometimes comes because your volume is too high or your volume is too low? So all these were taken into perspective. But the most important thing is thinking of the younger kids. I've got my FS2 kids on campus, Yannicka, if you can believe that. And they are very young, and some of them have opted to stay at home. So you can imagine how it feels like for an FS2 kid who's 3 or 4 years old, sitting at home in front of the computer with an adult monitoring him or her, logging in and interacting and controlling the volume and stuff, and the technicalities of the operation. And the teacher in the classroom has to deal with that student online, while there's another similar age student in front of her waiting for that teacher to teach him or her. So all of these combinations have to be taken into consideration. The challenges, as I said, were very high, but I think the rewards will be also high as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mohammed, for sharing that. And I think some of the biggest challenges is probably how to engage students when you have a group of students in your classroom and a group of students that are learning from home. And how do you make the students that are at home feel connected with the students that are on campus? And of course, much harder to do that when you're dealing with the youngest students.
Absolutely.
Henning, is there anything that you would share in terms of either technology adaptation, financial constraints, or developments that you have chosen? I see that we have many questions about how to train teachers also to handle this new way of delivering a blended model, and if there's any time for that.
Yeah, look, this is a very, very good question. I think when it comes to technology platforms, there are many different platforms out there, many different solutions. And I think what really is important is what one feels comfortable with, and also looking at the constituencies that are going to be using those platforms. It's really the weakest link is going to determine the success of that overall experience. Right. So if the weakest link is, for instance, that you do not have devices that can actually connect from a child's home to school, then this experience is not going to be a positive one. Right. So one has to really eliminate those basic shortfalls in that system and try out different things, what works. In some of our schools we use Google Classroom, which many of the other schools will be familiar with. In another school, we've switched our entire curriculum delivery onto Canvas because we found that from our experience of Dwight Global Online, that has been working with us for many years, that is the best possible platform to then deliver that experience to students. One key element, and this again ranges or varies from the age of the child, is synchronous teaching. I mean, we found that the experience to be a good experience of education for students that are used to participate in the classroom, you cannot simply push information out and expect those students to be at home and then self-direct and just fill in assignments. Right, so we bring for very high level of synchronous teaching and learning right from the start, and then found after a little while the right balance, because also too much synchronous when you have all your students outside and everybody dependent on the screen only is also that becomes counterproductive. Okay? And this was throughout the process of trying and based on different ages, we found the right formula that both students as well as teachers were able to cope with a very different demand than what they were used to. And I think in terms of personal development, in terms of preparing teachers, unfortunately, the book has not been written on what we're experiencing right now, right? So, we're always happy to share best practices, and we're also happy to always receive best practices from others, because we are all experiencing the same challenges. There's not one solution for everything, and there are multiple solutions that may work together in unison that will create a better experience. Mm-hmm. But we are still at the beginning of also understanding what it means and how you can continue to improve your processes. Right? We do have this evaluation process. We're looking at educational outcomes and so on. But this is still early days in order to really gauge what has the best outcome and then what has the best results. And so I think, Janneke, you earlier mentioned something about students' well-being being a major focus. We still don't understand today what this situation that we are dealing with, what is the short, medium, and potential long-term impact on students' well-being, on faculty, teachers' well-being. Okay, because everybody was sort of confronted with a new situation, and everybody did incredibly well. On balance, when you really look at the success of having such a seismic shift from one behavior to another, has been incredible. The results, but again, we still don't quite understand what it will do and how it affects everybody's well-being, and as this situation continues to go on.
It's a very good point. I think we are living a moment in history that a generation from now, there will be university studies probably looking at the longer term effect of students having lived through this kind of education landscape, maybe particularly from a well-being perspective. A question that have come up several times in the Q&A here is actually about what everybody has talked about, but if there is, you said, Henning, that the book hasn't been written yet, and somebody has asked for a checklist, kind of the right things to do. I hadn't planned on sharing anything, but I would like to ask maybe Mohammed if an idea could be for us to share the checklist that actually is issued by the authorities. For those that are outside of the UAE, Henning, you also alluded to the fact that we are in a heavily regulated country, which is actually very helpful. So when we start up schools in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi or in the Emirates, we are fortunate to have a regulatory authority that helps us be successful in the startup. And even if the checklist is long, as you said, Mohammed, 100 points, and you need to get them right, very good to have that over not having anything at all, which is the case for some of our participants are in countries where the regulations are much more vague. So I think it could be a good idea for the global community to access some of our checklists that can help from a security perspective, at least.
Well, Yannick, I would gladly share that checklist. However, I mean, there's obviously confidentiality issues. The regulator has specifically and strictly requested us not to share that. But what we can do is that we can speak to GESS, and then we can give them our own personal that we developed in the school in-house checklist, and I share it with the webinar hosts, and then they would share it with all their audience, and I'm glad to do that. I mean, I was looking at some of the questions, and they said, what are the first 5 things that you can give us as a tip? I mean, the number one is to write down your health and safety protocol. I mean, what is going to be done on a daily basis, on a bi-weekly basis, on a monthly basis. Now, of course, everything's written in the protocol has to be implemented. It's going to be evidence-based. The second is to set up the plan for welcoming the students, how they're going to go in, the route, the entrance, I mean, the staggered start, the timings. Of course, some students would arrive using the school transportation, what time they're going to arrive, what time they're going to be leaving at home, and what the arrival in the school, the point of entry, where is that going to be? All that has to be described in the document. Third is to make sure that your IT setup inside every classroom is ready in terms of the equipment needed to deliver the blended learning. If the school is delivering the blended learning, which is like my school, we're doing the face-to-face and the distance learning at the same time. So the IT has to be ready. Fourth and most importantly, I think, is to have a very nice CPD training program at the start of the induction week for the staff when they join, to break them into, slowly but surely, break them into this new normal, which is the blended learning. Again, in March, teachers were only exposed to distance learning alone. Now we're talking about distance learning and a face-to-face at the same time. It requires a totally different dynamic, totally different set of skills. The movement in the classroom makes a difference. The tone of the voice makes a difference. The volume makes a difference. I mean, we have to keep in mind that you are delivering a live face-to-face classroom and the parents are watching. This has never happened before. So these are the things that we need to consider. Fifth is to trust your plan. That's very important. Trust the plan, because if you don't trust it, if you don't believe in it, you're not going to make it. You have to trust your plan. Believe in what you are doing. The guidelines, I mean, I'm just reading something on the Q&A, is that these guidelines are available on the regulators' websites, so they are there available.
I think Mohammed struck all the right chords in his his description. There are 2 additional ones, which has been very important to us, and the great realization. There has to be an absolute transparent and timely communication of all stakeholders. If there is communication inhibited and information does not flow, we don't understand what some of the cases that we might be dealing with are, either from a student, from a parent, from a teacher, from any one of the staff members. That creates a bottleneck, and inevitably that system is falling down. Right? So having a timely communication, and sometimes it's better to over-communicate than not to communicate enough. Yeah, I mean that's one of those universal realizations that we've had. The other thing is having a very clear safety protocol, which everybody really understands what their role is and what they have to contribute as part of creating safety around schools. And safety around schools, but also safety on distance learning, when you are accessing devices and you're sharing information and so on. Because we've never had an event really of this magnitude globally where somebody's behavior can potentially create a risk to another human being, right? So this is a completely new experience for everyone, and it has to be clear that for everybody what their role is and how they can help mitigate problems further down the road. So this is part of a very clear communication and making everybody understand what those rules are, and then have clear policies and guidelines. What is acceptable and what is not acceptable, particularly as I mentioned when it comes to distance learning. And then of course, and Mohammed has mentioned certain levels of defense, lines of defense. First one is physical separation is the first line of defense. Protective gears and masks is the second line of defense. And so on. So there are various things and steps which again regulators have been very helpful in providing us with guidance what to use, and it's also widely available. When you browse the internet and see what others have done.
I think the additions that you brought to the table are very very valuable. For those that have not started up on-campus learning yet, I would also add that a clear communication, but also a plan on how to handle teachers having to switch between on-campus and off-campus teaching. Because, of course, in this pandemic landscape, there is a probability that the faculty members will also be affected by the virus, whether they are close contact or contracted. And you will, as a school, have to be able to shift to a situation where you might have your students on campus, but your teacher is off campus. And for you, Kevin, who hasn't started up yet in school, I would add that to the contingency planning and your readiness for startup, to think about how you make your environment ready for that. And back to what Henning said, this is also about communication, just communicating the expectations and preparing the teaching staff, the students, and the parents for these fluctuations that are quite unique, and we've never seen anything like this in the past in the way we deliver excellent education to the students.
Yeah, and indeed, and we, as part of because we've had some time since March, April, and May when everyone very quickly switched to online learning. We had more time over the summer to better prepare for the next stage of online learning at the moment, and a big part of that for us was looking at the socialization and the unstructured time between students and parents and staff within that environment, because in the rush to technology and to online learning and provide structure and routine and delivery of lessons, I think that was something that was easily overlooked, is allowing all those things that would happen in the day-to-day operation of a school, between classes at recess time, students interacting with each other and with teachers. A lot of that was lost in online learning. So that's been a big part of our plan this time around, is including that time. And, as we move forward, that will be front and center, in addition to what the other panelists have mentioned, when we do, and that we don't over structure things for our students and not allow them time and space to be kids, and of course maintaining all the health and safety protocols and procedures, but how do we then still allow them that time to be kids and to socialize and interact as they once did.
I'll ask a question, and I'm not going to direct it at any particular one of you, but rather let the one who feels compelled to answering pick up the question. And it's again raised by our audience. concern is for how do we tailor for inclusive learning? How do we create opportunities that meet the needs of individual students, either in the blended learning or in the distance learning environment? Is any of you who would like to answer to that? Because I think it is of course a layer of the challenges that are different.
Well, I'm happy to jump in just quickly. I mean, one way you can find out is by asking. I mean, you can ask the students, ask the parents, how would this best look for you in this scenario? And are we meeting your needs? How do you best learn? I mean, all those things that we ask our students when they're in the classroom, we can ask them for this new environment, whether that's online or a blended hybrid or modified learning back at school, is to get that regular feedback and ask them the detailed questions and to survey those key stakeholders to see, are we meeting your needs? Are we meeting your learning needs? How can we do better to support your learning? Is one simple way to find that out.
If I may add a comment, I found that distance learning was actually a good thing for students that require special attention. I don't want to use the expression special needs, because in a way it was some sort of an individualized learning. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, you've got that Zoom or Teams or Google Classroom in front of you, but when the work is done and returned to the teacher, it's an individualized work that the teacher can scrutinize and then return back. I remember during the March, April, May, as Kevin mentioned, we had some of our teachers were interacting with individual students up till 12 midnight. Because they were returning and then they were having a look at the work and then returning the work back, and then the students, because I mean it coincided with the month of Ramadan and people days turned to nights and nights into days, so there was this kind of individualized learning experience. I just want to add that whichever the model is, it's what we have planned for. If we have taken a provision to our students who require extra attention, then there's going to be room to cater for them. So it all goes back to the plan. And when we have our reopening plan, that should be taken into consideration. That how are we going to cater for the people who are most in need, special needs, people with certain abilities that require more attention. That has to be looked at. And Yannicka referred to something very interesting, which happened with me last week. I had a teacher who displayed symptoms. She was negative, but she had symptoms, and as per the protocol, she has to go home, get tested, and take the 14 days, and then get tested again on the 12th day, and then return on the 15th day. But then I have face-to-face kids, and she can work online from home, but what's going to happen to the face-to-face kids? It's a primary class, and we have an assistant teacher in the classroom. So we were able to use the assistant teacher to monitor the students face-to-face while everybody was learning in an online environment. Even the face-to-face students were learning as if they are online. Now, and this is the advice. I mean, when we were training our teachers to how to deal with the blended learning approach, how to combine the distance learning and the face-to-face students at the same time, our main message to them was to focus on the online students, because the face-to-face students are already in front of you, are very close to you. So focus on the online, treat your lesson as if it's an online lesson, and the whole lesson will bring itself together.
I think that is a good piece of advice, Mom, and that's very practical and hands-on as well for any of the educators that might be listening in to this discussion today as well. And it requires some training when you're back in the classroom. Obviously, that works, as you say, when an educator has to self-isolate for a period of quarantine. But it's a good piece of advice for anyone who's in the classroom now and who also has distance learners who are connecting from home. I know that the question about adapting to personalized learning is probably one of the silver linings that came out of the experience. And I'd like to take this as a segue into a more future-focused approach with the next question. And I'll start with you, Henning, in terms of what might be some of the educational disruptors that you have experienced through these past months that you actually want to implement as more a new norm and bring the school forward in its development, rather than looking at going back to the ways we did things before.
Right. Well, I think a key here is we need to realize that the new normal, as it is right now termed, is actually the next normal currently today, and we don't really know where things are going to go from here on. So, but there's some things which we believe we will certainly could be considered a silver lining. Technology as an enabler, we spoke about this earlier. There is certainly a drive in all schools to have a more robust technology platform, which students, teachers, faculty, everybody will be benefiting from. So there's immediate investment that has already taken place. As well, we would see also future investment going into this direction. I think, and there's also an enhanced awareness and understanding at home. And Mohammed mentioned it earlier, when you have parents now actually looking over the shoulders of students and seeing what is going on in the classroom. We actually felt it had a tremendous positive impact. There's a renewed appreciation of how hard our teachers and faculty work, and is a different level of understanding from parents as well, who really now understand what is going on in the classroom, or at least certain parts of the classroom. So this, to us, we see this actually as a very positive and something that hopefully will persist in the future, even if you go back to a different normal, as it may. There is the acceptability of distance learning, and distance learning has been around for quite some time, but in a mainstream environment of schools, it's always been looked at from a distance, literally, and it was not really an acceptable mode to as building it as part of delivering the curriculum in mainstream schools. And we feel that now this phenomena has brought about a different understanding of the benefits. Mohammed earlier mentioned as well, he's seen and witnessed some very positive developments when it came to distance learning, because as part of the differentiation and personalization, different students work differently. And some students have done so much better in certain subjects in distance learning as they would have done in the classroom. And we believe that there is a place for distance learning, components of distance learning in the future. And and we also believe this is a very positive aspect. Although we're also quite clear that it will not replace social emotional learning in a classroom, in a setup, in a class, in a class setting in the school. But it can complement, it can help differentiate and personalize. The other thing is, everybody had to write very quickly their contingency plans and risk assessments. And I think hopefully they will collect dust somewhere, because we will not use it required anytime soon again. But it has also prepared us as school leaders in all sorts of businesses to really think about risks very differently and be prepared for something that nobody really had expected. So again, it's a level of preparedness and awareness that we believe will only benefit all of us in the future, having gone through, the current situation, and having had that experience.
I think the experience has definitely proven to us that we need to be adaptable, agile, and change willing, even if we might not go back to something as significant as this kind of disruptor. But we are living in a constantly evolving landscape globally, so it is a good lesson learned to be open-minded and open to the changes that might be brought about with little prior notice. Kevin, I'm curious to know from a perspective where you're now seeing that you're going to do distance learning for a continuum of time. How do you tailor for the development of soft skills and the creative aspects of a K-12 education when you cannot have your students on campus? And when we had a short-term perspective, we might have some schools might have decided to focus on core and leave other things out. Others have tried to do everything. Is there anything that you're balancing now so that you can continue to deliver a holistic approach to your students' education?
Yeah, it's a really interesting challenge to do that in an online environment, and I think just the lived experience of what everyone has gone through, staff and parents and students, that they've been building many of those dispositions around resiliency and getting used to change and being adaptable and patience, having greater compassion and empathy for those people around them as just part of their everyday lives. And I think they bring that to the classroom, both the staff and the students. And for us, it's about ensuring some continuity around the extracurricular activities and programs that have been a big part of what we do in the past in our student leadership programs, and continuing that in the online environment. It's interesting here in Kuwait, outside of the school, Kuwait is almost back to normal. They're at stage 4.5 of a 5-stage reopening process in the country, with 1 sort of being full lockdown and 5 being fully open. We're at 4.5. It's just the schools that are shut. So there are opportunities outside the school for our students to engage in these types of things, and it's about harnessing that as a part of their lessons and their curriculum and the programs that they engage in at school around service learning and other things like that, which are important for us to continue and to see it as really as a transition. It's not a fixed state. It's doing these things in preparation for when we return, and focusing it in that area. And it's interesting to hear. I mean, as an expat in Kuwait, it's interesting to hear the stories of some of our parents who were here during the invasion of Kuwait, and the parallels that they articulate around the loss of learning when they were students at that time, when schools were suspended very quickly for 9 to 12 months, the impact that sort of traumatic experience had on them and their learning. And it's interesting to hear their perspectives and reflections now on what is currently happening, decades down the track. So it's interesting being in an environment and seeing some of those dispositions that those people have brought and bring to their conversation is really interesting.
Mm. Mohammed, I'm curious to ask, and I'll start with you, if you could speak a little bit to the teacher well-being also in this situation, and what might be good advice to others, and what have you done particularly to accommodate the new learning situation, or teaching situation rather, for your faculty?
Well, thank you, Yannicka. I mean, teachers are always sometimes the forgotten part of the whole process. Teachers are very important, and without them, we couldn't have made it this far. I remember when I met with my team back towards the end of February that the regulator wants us to come up with a contingency plan in 24 hours. The teachers did it for us, and we submitted within 24 hours. Teacher well-being was the top of one of the priorities at our school, and we did our best to ensure that we keep them as healthy and safe as possible. During the lockdown, we kept open communication, continuous communication with them. There was 2 or 3 emails on a daily basis from me to them. There was daily live video conversations with all of them, dealing with their line managers, with the head of primary, the head of secondary, the counselors, the supervisors. The teachers themselves were meeting regularly, discussing issues, sharing best practices, talking about. I'm talking here about mainly teachers who are single and sometimes living in a studio apartment or a one-bedroom apartment alone, and they had no companion because it was a lockdown. So these are the people that needed most care. So we opened up all the communication channels possible. We made sure that they are given all the advice possible and the necessary support in case they needed it. When we decided to come back to school, come the end of July, early August, and then when it was time for people to possibly return or to join back, we had all sorts of policies and protocols in place to ensure their health and safety and well-being. We had we during our induction period, we talked about all the processes and the security protocol that needs to be implemented. Number one, they are in the line of fire. I mean, they are with the students. They are the people who are putting their lives at risk. So we need to ensure that they understand specifically the details of the health and safety and how to remain safe in these situations, how to not to neglect any sign that appears on any student or anybody within the school environment. I had a situation when a teacher during one of our meetings mentioned that, well, we as teachers are doing everything we can to maintain the health and safety of the institution, others are not. And then later I discovered that she was referring to a few assistant teachers getting together during lunchtime and having lunch together, not maintaining social distancing. So to me, that was an indicator that the teachers themselves have become the owners of the protocols, and they are keeping an eye on it and reminding the leadership of the institution about if somebody is not keeping a good eye on those protocols. So as an organization, I can say that we're proud of what we have done to our teachers. We continue the communication with them. We share best practices. Any update with regards to what's happening out there on the street is immediately shared with them.
Good. Henning, anything you would like to add? I am conscious that we are coming towards the last few minutes of our hour. There are lots of questions that have come up in the Q&A. I hope we have managed to answer many of them. I recognize that there are questions that we've not been able to answer, and I would also like to recognize to all of you that are listening in that I see that we are speaking from a perspective where we have a relatively solid infrastructure for both on campus, off campus, and blended modalities of teaching and learning, whereas some of you are in countries where the basic infrastructure is not in place, and we might not have addressed fully the concerns that you're grappling with. Hopefully that can maybe be a topic for a GESS talk in the future. But Henning, some last reflections maybe on or advice to our audience.
Well, again, I can only amplify what Mohammed has already said in terms of the different safety protocols. You know, those are essential workers and the most important touch points to our students, right? So when I was speaking earlier about very clear safety protocols that included and specifically included teachers. We have teachers, they're also our parents, they're also concerned about their well-being, their own well-being, as well as in relation to their students, to their children, right? So, for us, again, very clear communication, delivering that support, being able to be there to address any concerns that have been brought up and have been noticed, and work together as a team to try and rectify situations as we've gone along. And that, again, this, I cannot stress that enough, this two-way communication also for faculty, teachers to also get the feeling and feel truly understood and that their concerns are taken seriously, right? Those are just general concepts that, you would apply in your school anyways, but particularly in a crisis situation as such, this has really helped us tremendously.
Thank you. I cannot agree more. Kevin, you're also in a situation where you have to take care of your teachers who are still doing distance learning, and both the mental health and well-being of students and faculty and staff, for that matter, are, of course, I'm sure, top of mind for you as well. Do you want to share any last minute reflections?
Yes, well, it's important to create, we found connections between teachers, particularly the expat teachers, everyone, but particularly those expat teachers that may be away from home, living by themselves, particularly if they're under lockdown or things like that, that having a close connection or buddy with a fellow staff member with their admin and regular check-ins can be really important. And nothing professional necessarily, just a check-in to make sure they're okay, see how they're doing, how they're coping, everything's okay. I think that would be one of the good things that we take forward, is in some ways an increased connection with the staff and between the staff as we move forward. Online learning, but again, when we come back on campus.
Exactly. So some of the things that you learn from this experience that you will continue doing and not discontinue, because we might go back to a situation where it's more a familiar landscape of on-campus learning. The well-being focus has certainly been elevated, I think, globally. So I agree. Also, something good will come out of a tough learning experience, and the focus on a balanced life and balanced learning. So be well to learn well. I am mindful that we're on time. We're kind of wrapping up a sentence on the hour. To the panelists, Mohammed Saed, Henning Fries, and Kevin Korbrook, it has been a pleasure for me to moderate a conversation between the three of you, or the four of us. You have shared very interesting perspectives on this current situation, which of course is challenging at many levels. A lot of good advice, hopefully, to our listeners. And I do recognize that, again, there are questions that we didn't touch on, but there will be more guest talks as well. And Sarah, I suppose there might be opportunities to revisit some of the questions that have come up in some of the planned sessions that are coming after this one. And I think with that, I would like to thank everyone for being part of this session tonight, or today, this morning, whatever time zone you are in. I took great personal pleasure in being here, and it's always very important to share and to learn from each other. So personally, I take away also great ideas and reflections from listening to the various perspectives that have been shared today, and also from the questions that have been raised, because it kind of sets a tone for what people are concerned with in this particular situation. So thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, Yannicka. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, my fellow panelists.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. That was brilliant. We had a record number of questions from the audience, so I'm sure you could see them all coming in. It just shows how important the insight was and how inspiring it was for everyone. So thank you for all questions. Thank you to the panelists. We've got lots of great ideas for topics and suggestions going forward. If you have any more, email us at marketing@gesseducation.com. We'll be sending out an email tomorrow with a link to the webinar. And once we close this, we'll have a short survey. So again, tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you. So massive thank you to everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.